Happy day students. Welcome to class 10 English. Today we are going to study lesson 1 from your supplementary textbook. The name of the textbook is Footprints Without Feet. Lesson 1, A Triumph of Surgery by James Herriot. Let us first know about the author. Author James Herriot was a veterinary doctor. He was known for his autobiographical books. He was born on 3rd October 1916 in UK. He took his last breath on 23rd of February in 1995. Dear students, by reading the title of the story, you must have got some idea about the story. If not, let me give you some clue. The story, Triumph of Surgery, is a humorous account of an overfed dog who has become very fat and sick thanks to the excessive concern of his owner. The narrator, a veterinary surgeon, rescues the dog by taking him to his hospital after convincing the owner that the animal could not be cured at home. He treats the dog by putting him on compulsive fasting for 2 days. However, the owner mistakenly considers the pet's cure to be a triumph of surgery, least realizing that controlled diet and exercise were responsible for the pet's recovery. Let's see what happened then. The theme of the story is that overindulgence can be life-threatening, especially when the caretaker is ignorant. Tricki's life comes under threat because of his owner. Who was the owner? Mrs. Pumphrey. Expresses her love for him by overfeeding him. She used to show love to his pet by giving lot of food. Another theme of the story is the tactfulness of the young and efficient veterinary surgeon. He cures Tricki without any medication by doing what? By simply controlling his diet and giving him proper exercise. Students, now let's see the story at a glance. So what happens? The narrator of the story, A Triumph of Surgery, is Dr. Herriot, who is a veterinary surgeon, who gets really worried about Tricki, who is the pet dog of a rich woman, Mrs. Pumphrey. He is shocked to see the excessively fat dog with red eyes and lolling tongue walking with his owner in the street. Actually, what happened? Mrs. Pumphrey made Tricki ill. How? Mrs. Pumphrey, who is foolishly indulgent, claims that Tricki listlessness is an outcome of malnutrition. So what she did? She overfeeds him with some extras like malt, cod liver oil. She also gives him a bowl of Horlicks at night to make him sleep well. In addition, she serves him cream cakes and chocolates in spite of vet's advice to cut down on dog's sweet intake. Dr. Herriot concludes that the real problem with the dog is the greed of food, along with excessive pampering by whom? By his owner. Who was the owner? Mrs. Pumphrey. To make things worse, Tricki is not being given adequate physical exercise. Now, the vet warns Mrs. Pumphrey that if Tricki's diet is not modified and if he is not given exercise, he is bound to become seriously unwell. This prediction comes true within a few days. Tricki stops eating and lies panting all the time on the rug with intermittent bouts of vomiting. The vet had anticipated this situation when long back and is ready with a plan. Tricki to be in hospital. The foremost thing he does, who is he? The vet, the doctor. He does is to get Tricki away from his owner. So he convinces her, whom? Mrs. Pumphrey, that the dog has to be hospitalized and for a fortnight in order to cure him. This makes Mrs. Pumphrey restless and she is certain that her dog would not be able to bear such a long separation from her. But the vet is determined to save the little dog and he takes him away, wrapped in a blanket, much against the wishes of the owner. Tricki in hospital. At the surgery is that hospital, the other dogs get curious and gathered around the vet. They sniff the motionless Tricki and find him to be an uninteresting object. They ignore him when he does not respond. Tricki's treatment. What happened then? The doctor makes a comfortable bed for Tricki and places him in a loose box next where the other dogs used to sleep. He observes him closely for 2 days and does not give him any food except plenty of water. Toward the close of second day, what happened then? Tricki starts taking some interest in his surrounding and on the third day he starts making a feeble sound in response to the dogs in the yard. When the doctor opens the door, Tricki goes out slowly and immediately surrounded by Joe, the greyhound and other dogs. They inspect him, roll him over and move off down the garden. Tricki follows them despite his surplus fat. Tricki shows improvement. Later, at the feeding time on that day, the dogs rush headlong towards their bowls and start eating noisily and greedily. After the dog finish their food, Tricki walks up to the shining bowls and casually licks into a couple of them. The next day, an extra ball is kept and the doctor feels happy on seeing Tricki jostling towards the bowls. From this point onwards, Tricki's recovery paces up. He starts taking interest in playing with other dogs who accept him as a member of their gang. Like them, he too starts fighting on food at mealtime and at night hunts for rats. Dr. Herriot is pleased to see Tricki recover without any medication. So the dog started behaving naturally. Now, when Tricki becomes all right, what happened then? However, a worried Mrs. Pumphrey keeps on ringing up the surgery at least a dozen times a day to inquire whether her pet dog's comfort is being taken care of. Dr. Herriot smartly evades her queries and assures her that Tricki is out of danger and is improving gradually. This makes Mrs. Pumphrey anxious and she begins to send abundant supply of what? Eggs and wine to enrich her little dog's blood. This feast is used by dog. Do you think it was given to dog? No. It was used by vet and his attendants since such a rich diet was not good for the dog. So Mrs. Pumphrey was sending it for his poor dog who required all this thing. But what was happening? The doctor and the attendants were enjoying that diet. Now at last, the most awaited day came in Mrs. Pumphrey's life. Mrs. Pumphrey comes to take Tricki home. After relishing these delicacies for a fortnight, the doctor overcomes the temptation of extending Tricki's stay. He informs Mrs. Pumphrey that the dog has recovered fully and can be taken back home. Within minutes of his call, what happened? Can you guess? Mrs. Pumphrey arrives with a long gleaming car to collect whom? To collect Tricki. Dr. Herriot fetches the cured dog, who is now a muscular and a smart animal. Tricki surprises his owner by rushing through the chauffeur's open door, licking her face and barking out of sheer happiness. The dog was very happy to see Mrs. Pumphrey, and it was vice versa. Mrs. Pumphrey thanks the doctor and drives away with tears of joy, thinking that surgery saved her dog's life. So what do you learn from this story? What is the message given in this story? Through the story, A Triumph of Surgery, the author, who is a veterinary surgeon, wants to convey the message that our love for our pet should not be expressed by pampering them. Okay? Because Mrs. Pumphrey was pampering Tricki too much. Such overindulgence can be life-threatening for the poor animal who cannot speak, okay, who trusts his master completely. In fact, pets need a balance between indulgence and strictness. A restricted, wholesome diet supplemented with plenty of exercise is all that is needed to keep one's pet healthy. Excess of everything is bad, even of love.
Thank you.